Updated power rankings after week 7.
College football is back, and we're back on the big mountain.
Hey, great to have you back on the mountain. I am JY, and this is my good friend Steve, and we are a week later than we typically would be with our power rankings, but we're here to do it. We have to catch up from 3 weeks, because the last time we did this was after week 4, and I'll tell you,
A lot has changed.
Oh my gracious, it was hard to do this, son of a gun, because people were beating people who beat other people, and then they lost, and it's a hot mess, but we'll get into that here in a minute. So for people that haven't seen our power rankings before, what we do, we focus on the Big Ten and the Mountain West. So of course, we bring all of the Big Ten schools in. We bring all of the Mountain West schools in. We also have brought in the Pac-12 schools because we have been following them and because they're just playing the Mountain West. They're frankly a part of the Mountain West this year, whether you like that or not. That's really what's happening. And we also brought in Florida State because we believe Florida State will become part of the Big Ten in the not too distant future. Not next year, but, several years out. So, and man, that's been a heck of a ride, getting them somewhere into all this. It's been way weirder than I thought it was going to be. But we're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to work our way up. So everything we just talked about, 33 different teams. So I'm going to go over 33 to 22. Typically, we'd go to 20, but we have a 3-way tie for 19. So we're going to hold off on those 3. I'm going to go 33 through 22 and have a little discussion about this. So at the bottom of the barrel, we have, believe it or not, the Air Force Falcons struggling to score points. Then we've got Wyoming, then Hawaii, then San Diego State, Purdue, Utah State, New Mexico, UCLA, Colorado State at 25, Northwestern, Maryland, and then at 22nd, Michigan State. And I will just say, Colorado being one of the several teams, and we'll get to those 19, that have all kind of beaten and lost to each other, so very difficult to do. If we have any Rams fan, I'm wearing my Rams shirt. I could understand why you say, well, why do you have them down here when they beat, San Jose State, which we haven't even gotten to yet? Because it's a hot mess at this point. They've beaten different teams. So we had to just kind of go off of, okay, who else have they beaten? Where do we think this team's at? And Colorado State here is at 25th, but I will say Colorado State is one of the schools that we had the biggest disagreement with. I had them at 20, you had them at 27th, and really, other than beating San Jose State, which I don't want to discount that, absolutely, they beat San Jose State, they'd be down here in this mid-20 realm. So, how do you put that into the rest of the schedules is really, I think we looked at that a little bit differently, and that's probably why they're down here. So, any school you want to talk about down here in this bottom tier?
Well, I'll just say real quick, I was pretty sure that we were going to agree on Air Force being the bottom team. Yeah. But we ended up agreeing the bottom 4 just straight up exactly in the same order, which I thought was pretty cool. And then, like you said, this next group of 10 to 12 teams is just such a jumbled mess with them. Like where the middle to bottom of the Mountain West, and then where do they compare to each other, and then where do you slot in with the middle to bottom of the Big Ten?
Right.
It wasn't too easy. One team that I want to throw out there, because I've always been hard on the Lobos, is they might be climbing here. That was another team that we had differences on. I think you maybe had them higher than I did.
A little bit, yep. I had them up in 23rd.
Yeah. So I could definitely see, they keep winning, keep playing well. That's one where they could jump up, mainly just because if I rank them a little bit higher, you already have them higher, so we could see them jump up in the next group easily.
Yeah, for sure. And, just out of the next group here, Michigan State and Maryland here, those were 2 teams I had a little bit lower than you. You are the Big Ten guy, but as you say, I would say from about 18 to 29 here, it was a little tough at times. You got to have the upper group and the bottom group, but man, you can make an argument from 18 to 29 pretty easily. So let's get to the next tier. We've got, like I say, we've got a 3-way tie here to start off, Steve.
Yeah. So right here at the bottom, the 3-way tie: Fresno State, San Jose State, Nevada. The story of those are 3 teams that they've now come to be basically at the same spot.
Yep.
However, Fresno has not lived up to the expectations.
Right.
I had them as in the Mountain West Championship game. We had them as definitely part of being in the 3-team race to get into, top 3 or top 4 in the Mountain West consensus. And they've dropped, the last couple of weeks with having some losses here. And Nevada and San Jose State have both played over where we thought they would be preseason.
Yep.
Now Nevada is one I just don't know what to make of them. They had they did have a great win this week. But they had some other losses, so I'm still trying to figure out where Nevada should be. But moving on up, Florida State we have in the middle of this group. Again, another team I had them higher than you. What's really hard is they don't play like hardly any common opponents with either the Big Ten or the Mountain West, so it's very hard. We expected them to be really good this year and be able to compare them to like 10. Oregon and Ohio State, Penn State. Yes. But where they are and the teams they've lost to, it's just really hard to figure it out.
Absolutely.
So they're right in there. And then, honestly, you have a big group of, when we have Oregon State in there, the Beavs, who good solid team, but they just lost to Nevada,
right?
And it's hard to really figure out where they're at. And then we have a group of Big Ten teams, Rutgers, Washington, Minnesota, and USC, who've had some they've had some success, but have also had some losses.
Yeah.
And then we've slotted Washington State in there at 13. We were both pretty consistent on Washington State.
Yep.
They beat, they just beat Fresno. They beat Washington at home previously, so they're having a good season. They're right there. And then there's just some Big Ten teams in there that maybe they could move up, or we may see them drop like a rock here pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, people might say, well, why do you have Washington ahead of Washington State if Washington State beat Washington? Well, that was, 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're power ranking today and where teams have gone. I think Washington has gotten better over those 4 weeks. I think Washington State, I'm still trying to figure them out. I mean, their defense is not very good. So I'm sorry. And yes, they just beat Fresno State, but Fresno State's sitting 3-3. And I mean, who would have thunk at halfway through the year here, Fresno State's down, tied for 19th. We would have never thought that in our preseason pickings.
I would have thought they'd been knocking on the door for the top 10.
Top 10, right.
And I will say, Washington State, that came down to the last possession of the game, the last play of the game, and it was at Washington State. So really, those two teams are pretty much even.
Pretty even, yeah. So that's where that's at. And Rutgers, dropping a little bit here after that just abysmal Week 7 game. Oh, my gosh. And, of course, they're going to drop. We're going to have to see where they go, because if they can't turn it around real quick, they're going to keep going down this list. And I think Oregon State was the hardest for me. I mean, when you look at, I talked about the schools that kind of were all jumbled up. When you look at Colorado State, Nevada, Oregon State, and San Jose State, they're all beating each other and losing to each other. So who's better than who? It's hard to pick. And I put more stock in Nevada than you did, maybe a little less stock in Oregon State than maybe that you did, although I guess we had them out here the same. But yeah, it's you put them in a pot and you jumble them around. It's crying out loud.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's get to our top 10. I'll do the next 5, and then we'll do the last 5 after that. So sitting at 10th, Michigan, still in our top 10, but not by much. Then we've got Iowa. We've got UNLV looking really strong. Mm-hmm. Nebraska, who has also got into the AP top 25 now, and rightfully so. And then Illinois with a squeaker out of Purdue, but a dub's a dub, and they have looked very good, and they beat Nebraska. So we've got Illinois. We did, clearly have Illinois ahead of Nebraska because they have a head-to-head not too long ago. Yep. But you could flip-flop them for me too, because that was a really, really good close game as well. So there's our next 5, and I'll tell you, Michigan being 10th, it is what it is. I struggle with them a little bit. We're not 100% sure where they're at, but when you look at the teams below, I'm like, yeah, okay, they should be 10th. But to me, when you get to this 9, 8, 7, 6, that's a good tier group there. That Illinois, Nebraska, UNLV, and Iowa. I would love to see UNLV play Iowa, because I think given UNLV's defense, I don't think Iowa's going to be able to score many points. And with that dual threat quarterback that UNLV has in Williams, I think that could be a great game. So I think we got UNLV about where they really should be here, Steve.
Yeah, and out of this group, UNLV, Nebraska, and Illinois, all 3 of those teams, I think, have a chance to move up into that top 5 group.
Yeah.
UNLV, I mean, if they have a huge game against Boise coming up, I mean, that could put them right back into the National College Football Playoff picture.
Right.
And then both Illinois and Nebraska, they're right there. To me, those 2 teams, Illinois, Nebraska, and the team we're going to talk about a little bit later, they're competing for that potential 4th Big Ten playoff spot. Correct. We don't know if they'll get a 4th one, but if there is going to be a 4th one, they're the ones that are competing for it.
That's true. Good point. And, I'm just going to speak to UNLV real quick. Yes, they lost to Syracuse, but Syracuse really should be a 6-0 team right now, right? I mean,
I have no idea how they lost.
I don't know how they lost to Stanford. They just beat NC State. And they play a ranked Pitt team.
Yep.
And I said to UNLV people on X, you should be rooting for Syracuse every week because the better that they do, the better your strength of schedule is. And frankly, I said all the Mountain West should be rooting for Syracuse to go. Hell, 11-1. I don't think they're going to go 11-1, but 10-2 would be great because that increases your strength of schedule, especially for UNLV. And there's nothing wrong with losing to that team. They were very close to them, and Kyle McCord's been just off the freaking rails here. So,
and I think it's important to point out UNLV still in that hunt for the Mountain West.
Yes.
That one loss that they had to, I mean, they had one of the harder. We talked about their out of conference schedule.
Yeah.
And we said at the beginning, if they could go 3-1 in that schedule, like they're set up really well. That's what they did.
That's right.
So it is what it is. But I think the big thing is now the only difference, we talked about this on one of the Mountain West episodes, is they probably have to beat Boise twice. They probably have to beat Boise in the regular season and beat them in the Mountain West championship.
They have to at least beat them in the championship.
Yeah.
At least. And even then it may not be enough.
Right.
But, assuming those two teams get there, yes. So let's get to our top 5 team. We have a tie here, Steve, for second, but I'll let you go over it. What do we got?
So getting right as soon as we enter the top 5 here is the other team that I wanted to talk about, Indiana, the Indiana Hoosiers. Coach Kirk Cignetti. Nobody thought anything about it. Most people didn't even know who Kirk Cignetti was. Yeah. We were on him from the beginning, talked about how he has won everywhere he went. Yep. Was really impressive at James Madison and really created kind of a G5 kind of all-star team and took them to play in the Big Ten. Yep. It's been great. Curtis Rourke has been fantastic. To me, should be in consideration for the Heisman Trophy. Just how efficient he has been leading that offense to 6-0. So to me, they have the inside track. I think they're maybe behind the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, but not too far behind. And to me, they have that inside track on maybe getting, I'd say, double-digit wins and that potential fourth playoff spot for the Big Ten.
Agree.
So I love right where they're at. I went back and forth on the next one, Boise and Indiana. I think both of them, they're just, two. And first I had Indiana first. I had them before them because they're 6-0. But then I looked, what's Boise's loss? Well, Oregon. An Oregon team that just beat Ohio State. Right. So I decided I kept Boise at 4, and you also had them at 4. We were consensus, I think, mostly on our top 5, except for we had 2 and 3 swapped. Right. So those two teams right there. I mean, Boise, the season that they've had, to me, they have the best college football player in the country on their team. Great season, great record. And that loss to Oregon, they gave Oregon everything that they could handle. There's no shame in that loss whatsoever. And honestly, if Boise wins out, they have the inside track on the 4th seed in the college football playoff, because I would have them ahead of the Big 12 champion, whoever the Big 12 champion ends up being. I just don't think there's any really good teams in the Big 12, and Boise is a darn good team that could end up going 11-1 and have the Heisman Trophy winner on their roster. So I love them there at 4. The next 2 teams, Penn State and Ohio State, they're tied there for second. I had them Penn State and Ohio State. You had them Ohio State, Penn State. Right. And I'm pretty sure, and you've said this before, you're not dropping Ohio State behind anybody until they beat them on the field. So that's why Oregon is number 1, because they beat Ohio State on the field. And both of those teams, we did a Big Ten recap. It was a heavyweight fight. Autzen Stadium was fantastic, and I'll tell you what, woe to any of the Big Ten teams who have to travel to Autzen Stadium and play Oregon in front of that crowd. Just amazing. The noise, the atmosphere, and Oregon, Dan Lanning's got something special there. And I'll just say real quick for Penn State, they're 6-0. They're going into their bye week. They got a good win on the road. They have 2 good road wins, but it's all going to come down to November 2nd when they have their chance to host Ohio State. Right. I see, with this win, I see Penn State as a playoff team now. I mean, I had them as a playoff team the whole way. Yeah. To me, this basically solidified, I think, which will be either a 10 or 11 win season and a playoff spot. But the big game, the big kahuna will be November 2nd when they host Ohio State, and they can prove and they can show, if they're able to do it, that they're right on that level with Ohio State and with the Buckeyes. Yep. So our top 5 real good there. I love it. That's all I got on the top 5. What are your comments?
I have a funny feeling we're gonna have a tie for second, unless something silly crazy happens. until November 2nd.
Yeah.
When the teams play each other.
Yep.
But I was with you on Boise and Indiana. I was like, at the very first, I had Indiana 4 and Boise 5, and I did exactly what you did. Okay, hold on. Who have they played? And it was the Oregon game that I went, you can't, especially now that Oregon just beat Ohio State, you can't discount a 3-point loss that Boise had against Oregon and could have won that game. Now, people want to say, oh, it was this, it was that, they had injuries. It doesn't matter. The game was played. It was a 3-point game, and Boise could have won that game somewhat, I don't want to say easily, but they had a legit shot of winning that game. So that's what made me go, nah. Boise's got to be my 4. You know, we'll see what happens with the Penn State-Ohio State game. As you said it perfectly, I'll say it again, but you have to lose, or Ohio State has to lose to you for me to put you ahead of them. So clearly Oregon's my number 1, and they're going to be number 1 until if potentially they lose to another team. And for Penn State versus Ohio State, a little bit this is kind of historical bias for me. Mm-hmm. Penn State hasn't been able to do it. I know it's different teams, but Ohio State's still fantastic team. I had to have them as my number 2. But I think it's fair enough that we have them as, a tie for 2. That's really probably the way it should be.
So I want to talk about Indiana a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, because I love talking about the Indiana
Hoosiers.
If
you're going to talk about the Hoosiers and Kurt Signetti, let's do it.
So they got a game against Nebraska coming up, okay?
Yes.
Huge game.
Big game.
If they can beat Nebraska, okay, they have 2 games left on the rest of their games are very winnable. They'll be favored in the rest of the games. There are 2 games that are going to be tricky if they beat Nebraska, okay? They've got Michigan and Ohio State both on their schedule. I'm just gonna say they're gonna lose to Ohio State. It just is what it is.
Right.
I originally had them 9-3 floor, 10-2 ceiling.
Right.
I think when I watch this team, and Michigan still has an elite defense, okay,
right.
and I get it. And Indiana's weakness, their biggest weakness, is probably their run defense.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying they will definitely beat Michigan, but they could beat Michigan. And so let me give you a scenario here. If let's say Penn State loses again to Ohio State,
right.
which is probably what you're expecting.
Yes.
So then you have, but they don't lose any of the other games. So then you have potentially Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State all at 11-1.
Right.
If that happens, I think the most likely scenario is Oregon and Ohio State will rematch in the Big Ten championship game. Right. But I think there's a scenario if Indiana can beat Nebraska and beat Michigan, where they're also 11-1. we could potentially have 4 11-1 teams in the Big Ten, and I don't think it's a stretch. I mean, again, Indiana, the Nebraska game is going to be tough. The Michigan game will be tough, but I don't think it's a stretch to see 4. And in that case, Big Ten's definitely getting 4 teams in the playoff. If you have that.
No, that's a good point.
And Kirk Signetti and the Indiana Hoosiers would make the playoff in that scenario.
That's a great point. That is how they would definitely get 4 teams in the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a scenario that could happen. I mean, that's not that far out there for sure. But the Indiana-Nebraska game,
huge,
big game coming up.
To me, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, they're all 3 are contention for that 4th spot in the Big Ten.
Yep, I agree. Well, that's where we're at through 7. We're going to do another one next week to get us back on track with our even weeks. Because let me tell you, 3 weeks was too much.
Yeah.
I struggled doing this. I think we hit it. I think we got it right. But we're going to do another one next week to get us back on track. So, hey, with that, we thank you guys for watching. Make sure you give this a like and subscribe if you like our content. We'll see you guys next time on The Big Mountain.